Okay, it looks like almost all of you managed to get back on again or didn't get locked out, which is terrific. And welcome to day 2 of this 7-day sesshin here at Mountain Gate, this COVID-19 sesshin done in a different format. And that actually is kind of the theme of the Tay Show, if it has a theme. One of the things that is the only thing permanent in life is change. Everything else disappears, comes into being, disappears. More things come into being, disappear. And that is the source of pain and suffering until we have seen deeply enough to have let go of the need to have something stay or something not be there. This is the whole basis of the Four Noble Truths. Mitra-roshi Rinpoche speaks of a woman who came to see him when he was in the States at one point in time when he was during his tours. And she was an older woman. And she came to him and she expressed a great deal of bitterness and anger about looking in a mirror. In fact, she had said that she actually broke the mirror because she hated what she looked like in that mirror. All she could see was wrinkles and old age, and it was not what she wanted to see. And most of us, looking in the mirror, would love to see somebody who's youthful and handsome and good-looking, who is popular and worthwhile and loved by people and all the rest of that. What we don't realize is that that comes from within. And it comes from within when we let go enough of our need to be somebody, that there's this catch when we look in the mirror and we don't think we are who we think we are, which is kind of interesting. Thinking is the problem, is it not? Thought is something that is very, very important. It's a tool, however, and it is taken as the basis for reality by pretty much everybody because that's what we're taught. I think, therefore I am. And if we don't think, are we going to disappear? Is this going to be a problem? So a year later, after talking to this woman, Mitra Rinpoche came through again. And this time she appeared before him and she was so much more relaxed, open, friendly. And let me read to you what she told him. This is from a book called Joyful Wisdom. And as you can see, Mitra Rinpoche is being totally joyful there in that cover. A year later, when I was passing through the United States again, she came for another visit. This time, she was relaxed and smiling. And after she sat down, she announced that she hadn't broken any mirrors since her last meeting. And that was the beginning of how he spoke about it. That she got so angry looking in the mirror and so frustrated looking in the mirror and so upset looking in the mirror that she actually broke the mirror. And of course, then she had to go buy another mirror. And the whole thing continued. But at some point, she realized what the Third Noble Truth teaches us, that there is a way out of suffering. Second Noble Truth teaches us that suffering comes as a result of clinging, hanging on to, trying to have things the way we want them, trying to not have things the way we don't want them. Everybody, if you really examine your life, can recognize this experience. The pain of loss, the disagreement of having to undergo something you didn't want to undergo or be with somebody you didn't want to be with, encounters you don't like, encounters you do like, and yet they disappear. But there is a way to be free in the midst of this, and it is a very real path, and it has very real, deep results. And it is the only true freedom that there really is. We can have things change in the direction that we like them to change in, but sooner or later they're going to change again. And there's going to be loss. Just recently, 2 people I knew well and cared about deeply have died. One of them was quite young. She wasn't yet 50, I don't think, which, of course, from my perspective, is quite young. And suddenly, without warning, she was diagnosed with stage 4 stomach cancer. And only a few months later, now she's dead, leaving behind a couple of kids who were just in middle school, twins, a boy and a girl, and a husband. The other person who died recently was older and had had a number of strokes. And it was time. Well, who's to say it wasn't time for the younger one as well? Our karma brings us to a point where we exit what we call this life, but we can never exit life with a capital L. So to continue with this woman's reaction or response, I realized after our talk, she explained, that time wasn't my enemy. Age wasn't my enemy. My own fixation was my enemy. When I looked in the mirror, and all I saw was what I thought other people were seeing. An old woman, unattractive and useless. And this is important. And I started acting that way too. So of course, people started treating me as old and useless. It became a vicious cycle. But when I started thinking about the experience I gained, over the years, I actually started feeling a little proud of myself, a little proud of my wrinkles. Each one was like a badge of honor. A crisis survived, a test passed. I started looking at other people my age, thinking, yes, we've all gone through a lot, and there's more to come, little changes and big ones. I won't say I jump out of bed every morning looking forward to the changes. I'm a little old for jumping, she said, and she laughed. But I find myself paying more attention to my life, to the moments, you might say, because that's all I have, isn't it? The moment. And there's a lot more going on in that moment than I ever thought. We live in a life of story. We've created that. We've been taught to create that. It's a little bit like the people in the Matrix, caught in the Matrix, drugged into a kind of a no state. We go through life. Sometimes we're happy. Sometimes really great things happen and we get excited and fulfilled temporarily. And then we want more. We need more. A long time ago at this point, before I started doing Zazen at all, even though I was sort of interested in learning meditation because TM was really big back then. This is in Washington, D.C. in the early 1970s when I had a strong commercial design business going. I was designing bank interiors for office buildings, all kinds of things like that. including, curiously enough, the bathrooms of high-rise buildings. And this is the public bathrooms. At any rate, I have told many of you this story before, but some of you may not have heard it. A catalog came into the office one day, a new catalog, and so I was becoming familiar with what it offered. It was a furniture catalog. And in the catalog were some really, really terrific design chairs, at least from my perspective. And they were red, which was my favorite color. And they would have gone perfectly with my white Saarinen dining table. And we could have used them. We were a little limited in chairs back then. And so I thought, okay, I'll buy the chairs. After all, I'd get a 50% discount. I was making enough money. It was easy to afford them back then. But immediately the next thought that came to me was, okay, you buy the chairs. Now, how long after that is it going to be that there's a release of this feeling of clutching, of wanting, of needing in your chest? How long will it be before that comes up again for some other thing? Maybe not the chairs, because you've presumably already bought them. Maybe it's for some other possession, some other situation, some other desire. And in that moment, it was very, very clear that unless I chose to opt out of that way of life, clinging, it was going to be an endless path of occasional happiness and a lot of disgruntledness and pain. And I never bought the chairs. If I hadn't realized that at that time, a year or so later, when I actually was plunged into a profound loss that motivated me to actually start practicing Zazen, I don't think I would have stuck it out. But I can tell you that all of the challenges that I went through, all of the pain, and there was plenty of it that I went through in my earlier years of practice, were so worth what it brought about. And that can happen for you as well. We live in a story, as I started to say. This story is a story of the great American novel entitled Me, I, Myself. And we write that story over our lifetimes. And it starts when we're very little and somebody says something to us that we jump to a conclusion about. And this is culturally programmed too. There is an honest need for human beings to be accepted, to be part of a group. And when we are not accepted, when there's some kind of clear message to us that we're not being accepted, we're told we're bad, we're told we're naughty, we're told we shouldn't do whatever it is we're doing. Sometimes we're told rather forcefully, and sometimes with violence. And that's a clear message. Okay, I'm not to do that. I'm bad. And if I don't want to be bad, then I've got to not do whatever it is. And the search for acceptance continues on through our life, unless we get off that desire train. So we write this great American novel, I, Me, My, about the story of our life, small l. And it is a story. All the while, we're living. And there is a choice at some point, if we are aware enough, to live with capital L or to live with a small l. To fully inhabit the amazing beingness, capital B, that we are, or to be enthralled to society, to what society tells us is how we ought to be. Just buy this lipstick and you will be so popular you couldn't believe it. Just get this haircut. Oh no, a new house. I got to have a bigger house. Otherwise, I can't keep up with the Joneses. And if I can't keep up with the Joneses, how can I maintain my superiority? On and on and on. And culture, emphasized through advertising, makes us feel like that's how we're supposed to live. Makes us want to live that way. Makes us feel that we need to live that way if we're to be accepted. And who wants not to be accepted? Not to be accepted is potentially annihilation. Cultural anthropologists feel that actually that need to be accepted, that need to be part of a group is genetically programmed in us. Conceivably, it could be, because in ancient times, it took more than one person to bring down a mastodon or to escape a saber-toothed tiger, or to manage to survive in the wilds that people had available to survive in back then. Since then, there's been a lot of transformation, a lot of seeming advances, and sure, they are advances, a lot of them, that allow people to live more comfortably, more healthily, longer. Not so long ago, the average age of the human being at death was in the 40s, in the early 40s, actually. Now, people are living into their 70s, 80s, 90s, 100s. There's a lot of benefits from progress. But at the same time, are we to stay trapped in the story? There was a movie that I saw, and I don't remember the name of it. It was a while ago. And it showed a man who lived in a kind of an ideal little community. His wife, who was quite pretty, was a nurse. And at the same time, it panned to kind of a different view where people were looking down on his life and manipulating it. It was quite contained. Somehow he had had some kind of escape or experience where he had opened to a different reality. Of course, this being a movie, there was a young, exciting woman involved who he had met on the beach one evening and then was never able to reconnect with. He realizes that somehow something is being manipulated. And so he goes into his den one night, ostensibly to go to sleep, take a nap anyway, and he manages to set the situation up to look like he actually is still there. And he somehow escapes the cameras that appear to be ubiquitous and heads off to his sailboat. And he's going to sail to the end of this story. And the people who are trying to manipulate the whole situation bring up a storm to try to convince him to turn back. They try everything they possibly can to get him to stay in the story. And he finally reaches the end of the set, leaves the boat, climbs up a set of stairs, and you see from a different view that the young woman that he had met on the beach suddenly sees that. She's been watching his whole story on television. Suddenly sees that and leaves and starts running to wherever it is that presumably he comes out of this. He climbs up the steps and there's a doorway, and he steps through the doorway out of the story into life with a capital L. He had been living the, quote, perfect life, but there was something missing. Some aliveness that was missing. Some level of freedom that was missing. And when we step out of our stories, which we can do through ongoing zazen, deepening questioning, which necessarily have to take place beyond words. Because if you question with words, you're just making another chapter in the story, basically. But the freedom to truly be free of a need to be approved, a need to be accepted, a need to be young, good looking, whatever else that you might feel a need to be, including having a lovely life. When you reach deeply enough that you can step out of that by seeing the truth with a capital T, your life will be transformed. Of course, there's a lot of work that needs to be done afterwards, but it is so much easier then because you've already seen what it can be like to be truly free. And then the old habit patterns will come rolling back, but they're weakened. You've now seen a different view, and it's clear that it's a more truthful view, a more clear view. And so at that point, it's hinging on your response or your reaction. Because there are people who've had Kensho experiences who have a nice intellectual understanding of what they have realized, but it has had made no impact in their lives. And that's a sad, sad situation. There are others who have a Kensho experience, realize, get hungry for more depth, more freedom, and keep working. And recognize that when the old habit patterns come roaring back in, that here is a wonderful opportunity to work on those habit patterns, to release them, to let them go, and to be free from them. This is the ongoing work of the advanced practice and the long maturation that Torei Enji speaks of. He was Hakuin's premier student, and I think he may have been his first Dharma successor. He was a very ordinary human being, and yet remarkably free. And that's what a deep enough Kensho helps you realize, that courses like this, how could I have not realized this earlier? And yet it seems like such a miracle when we pop back out of that understanding into the former reality that we've inhabited. And then we realized what a miracle it was, and how amazing the freedom from that miracle. Now, in this time of stress and strain, when we are bumped up against all kinds of limitations, just like today when I was researching how we can do a more effective Zoom event for all of you. And I came across a system, a mesh system that might work if we can manage to pay for it. And yet at the same time, there is this catch-22 to it because it's apparently quite easy to set up. It's an Orbi system and it has very high ratings. It's not as expensive as some of them are. And it is supposed to be the easiest one to set up. All you have to do is download the app for your phone and set it up with your phone. The only catch of this catch-22 is that here in these mountains of northern New Mexico, there is no cell signal. Not for my phone, not for any of the others here right now in the sesshin with us. So there would be no way to set up this Orbi system. So another wall. But then there may be an open door in it as well, because up in Taos, there's a place called, what is it called? Electric Sheep Computers. And apparently they know all about these kinds of things and sell mesh systems and other systems for computers, repair computers, and so on and so forth. And perhaps they will get back to us and we will have some idea what it would cost, presumably, to get a system, assuming they could provide it. They did not have in stock the one that looked like it might work for us. At the same time, if we were to buy it on Amazon.com, because Amazon is prioritizing shipments of things that are most urgent to have, and an Orbi system is not exactly urgent for most people, although most people would find it would be. We could wait months, literally, before we could get set up. So everything is in flux right now. But is that a problem? Right now, we have a temporary solution, giving Teisho right here in this beautiful room. And I hope that it will work for you. It didn't seem to be a problem, except possibly for one person who has not logged back in yet and may not have logged in or tried to log in. Maybe they just didn't have time to continue. At any rate, it was not such a hard transition to get re-upped on the internet through the router instead of through the Wi-Fi extender. And so for the rest of sesshin, we'll be doing it this way, and we'll see how it unfolds after this. But if we get invested in a felt need to have things a certain way, gotta have that mesh system right now, somehow. I'll drive up to Taos, I'll abandon sesshin and drive to Taos, which is an hour one way, by the way, and try to talk to this man who might be there and might not be there, and see if we can somehow manage to buy a mesh system and somehow have him come down and set it up with whatever ability he's got to set it up. Not really. There's no need to do that. Things are working fine the way they're working at the moment. And while it would be wonderful to have a mesh system so that we could do all the streaming in the Zendo, including the Teisho in the Zendo, flexibility is something that's important in Zen. It's important in life because flexibility allows us to let go of a felt need to do something or have something or be somebody. And what an amazing amount of freedom that offers. Just think, not to have to be who you think you need to be. What a luxury, what joy. And it comes down to the practice. Practice is the only way in this almost 80 years of life that I have lived so far to really open to that innate freedom that is inborn in us, and we can do it. We can try to figure out a way to do FaceTime or possibly Zoom sons. I'm not sure it'll work during sesshin just because of the schedule, but following sesshin, I think we can do it, and it's already happening for some people anyway. So if you would like to have this happen, please email me and let me know about it. I think you all have my email address. You certainly will have it because I was the one that sent out the invitation to the Zoom meeting. And another thing is we are working to get MailChimp up and running so that we can send out this issue of Mountain Gate Journal, which is already written, ready to go, and was supposed to have gone out the 15th, except we had challenges trying to get into MailChimp. We were locked out with a two-factor authentication because we couldn't receive SMS messages soon enough to get the code to get in, and so on and so forth. And that's part of what's going on right now these days with all kinds of communication hassles in many, many, many areas. But if you would like to receive the Mountain Gate Journal, it's just like the Oak Tree in the Garden, which I no longer edit. The Oak Tree in the Garden will be continuing, I think, quarterly through Hidden Valley Zen Center. Sozui Sensei is working on it, along with Ignatius Chen, who's a member there. But I will be working on quarterly issues of the Mountain Gate Journal. And again, if you would like to receive a copy, let me know. Anybody who has been receiving the Oak Tree likely will be automatically on, but since I no longer have access to the Oak Tree list in MailChimp, it's probably just best to email me and reiterate that you would like to have this quarterly issue of the Mountain Gate Journal. And I think that's about it. I would love to have suggestions for Teisho. If anyone has one, please email me, mfgbishop@gmail.com. That's Mitra Francis Given Bishop @gmail.com, mfgbishop@gmail.com. And I look forward to having you part of the sesshin through the end of sesshin. Thank you for listening. We'll stop now and quietly and to yourselves recite the 4 vows. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to liberate them. Clinging is inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to it. The dharmas are boundless. I vow to master them. The way of liberation is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. Thank you.